good vibrations.
All right, well, it's straight down to business with today's instalment. No faffing around. We're dealing with a subject which is very topical and is quite profound in terms of its wider implications. And anyone whose first instinct when hearing the story might be to think, oh, this doesn't affect me. Well, actually it does, because of what it means for the personal freedoms of every individual living in the UK. And of course, it will be the case in many other countries as well. First of all, let's welcome our returning guest for today. A lot of people will know him as the organiser of the Alternative View conferences, and he's one of the finest activists out there who really walks the talk as well and rolls his sleeves up and gets right into the thick of things, quite literally at times. Ian Crane, welcome back, mate.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? And thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no probs. I just felt it was quite an urgent need to get this show out because of the content, which will become clear. We're here to talk about the landmark legal case which came to a head this last week when a group of 4 activists who had tried to prevent Cuadrilla, the fracking giant, from accessing a drill site in Lancashire were given jail sentences for having exercised their right. And that would be an inherent right in creation rather than any right granted by any sort of man-made legal system to voice their objections to what this company was doing and to try and prevent the injustices that fracking represents from taking place. So you're someone with a working background in the oil and gas industry, so you obviously come with some understanding of these technologies, and you've been presenting daily morning blogs from various fields at frack sites where you've been camping out for several months. Could you just walk us through some of the brief background to this story then, and what led to this decision being taken this week?
Okay, I can indeed. First of all, let me just say I've been living in a field for basically 4.5 years now, not just a few months.
Wow.
This is primarily related to my extreme concern over the unconventional hydrocarbons industry and the attempt by the Conservative government to establish this industry in the UK. A very brief explanation. Conventional hydrocarbons, traditional oil and gas exploration and exploitation, whilst I can argue the case that we've never ever needed to extract hydrocarbons in anything like the volumes we have and we continue to abstract at 90 million barrels a day, which is, primarily to benefit the corporatocracy, because sales of transactions involving hydrocarbons are one of the easiest ways in which the establishment can raise taxation. And I mean, that's evident with when every time you go to the pumps to fill up, you're paying £1, nearly £1.30 or whatever a litre, and 70% of that is taxation. The rest, the 30%, is the actual cost of the fuel. But unconventional hydrocarbons is a different technology. It's the abstraction from what is very appropriately known as tight geology, i.e. geology that doesn't have a natural porosity or permeability. So it doesn't give up its hydrocarbons easily. So 21 years ago, a guy called George Mitchell developed the technique. He'd been working on it for many years, but he finally developed this technique, very aggressive technique, to pump water and sand with a mix of chemicals into the geology at enormous pressure, thereby effectively exploding the geology and releasing the hydrocarbons from that prison that it's been in for millions of years. The problem with this are the knock-on effects. I mean, the millions of gallons of frac fluid that are pumped into the well to release these hydrocarbons, some 60% of it never actually returns to the surface, and the industry has no idea where that 60% migrates to. What we do know experientially now from nearly 2 decades of this industry in the US and Canada and Australia is that these fluids, these extremely toxic fluids, have a tendency to migrate into either adjoining geology or find their way through natural faults or damaged well casing, cement up into the water table. So the risk of contamination is extremely high. And in fact, Dr. Sandra Steingraber, who is the author of or co-author of compendium of health and environmental impacts, and which was instrumental in getting New York State to ban fracking, it makes the observation that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to demonstrate that this industry can operate safely and without environmental risk and without risk to, not just human life, but all life. So my concern, and has been since the moratorium was lifted in this country in December 2012, that if this industry gets a foothold in the UK, the prognosis is almost a guarantee of a contaminated water table, contaminated soil, a devastation of the agricultural industry in the UK when we are already less than 50% self-sufficient in food production. And, basically, once this contamination takes hold, it's irreversible. So, it's effectively a means by which large tracts of land can be made, use that term loosely, or would become totally uninhabitable. So thus my concern. And thus the concern of the people that were arrested a year ago and then sentenced last week.
Am I correct in thinking that fracking has been outlawed in Wales, Scotland and Ireland, and it's just England remaining in the UK?
Well, Scotland and Ireland and Wales have very, very effective moratoriums, and these moratoriums have been put in place by basically making the planning regulations so watertight that there's no possibility of this industry getting a foothold. And in fact, the Welsh government has just completed a consultative period whereby they are looking to literally make that or turn that moratorium into a permanent ban. And I might argue that, perhaps some of the retribution by the British government for the Welsh taking that decision is to start dumping low-level nuclear waste off the coast of Penarth in South Wales. Just as the retribution for Lancashire County Council when they denied Cuadrilla the planning permission to drill at Preston New Road and Rossiter, just outside Blackpool, 3 years ago, the retribution was to immediately overturn a 13-year ban preventing use of the halite storage caverns for gas on the Fylde Peninsula. So, basically, whenever an authority, in this case the Welsh authority, makes a decision that central government doesn't like, basically they find a way to take their revenge.
Right. So these activists that have been sent to jail, one of these guys is Simon Roscoe Blevins, a soil scientist from Sheffield. I read his statement. He and 3 others have been made an example of, it seems, by the system. They just want to provide a deterrent to other people who might be thinking of voicing their concerns and taking on any kind of activism. The most concerning aspect of this whole affair is the implications it has for everyone in this land, because it demonstrates that very far from us living in a free country and a democracy where the will of the majority wins out, as we're trained to believe, it's actually a fascist dictatorship where corporations get to steamroll all over the rights of individuals, and they've got the law, it would seem, the police and the judiciary on their side. So this is a wake-up call for everyone, whether they've taken an interest in the issue of fracking or not, because it lets us know the true nature of the state in which we live, right?
Oh, that's absolutely right. And of course, this just doesn't apply to fracking. It basically applies to anything that the population decide to take issue with against central government. And the issue with fracking is bad enough in of itself. But I've also made the observation now for 4+ years that there is also great concern that the whole issue of establishing an unconventional gas industry, which would also obviously would necessitate the construction of a network of deep boreholes, particularly across the north of England, which is where the primary shale deposits lie. But the government also have a problem with their commitment to find a permanent home for the increasing volume of highly toxic nuclear waste. So they can dump the low-level nuclear waste off the coast of Penarth, or just let it wash out to sea by the outflow pipes as exist in most of the shore-based power stations, nuclear power stations. But the high-level waste, which has been in temporary storage since the dumping at sea was banned in 1983, it has to result in a permanent solution being found sooner rather than later. Now, in Finland and in France, the issue is being addressed by the construction of deep geological disposal facilities. And the one in Finland was completed some years ago at a place called Onkala, about 250 kilometers northwest of Helsinki. And all of their highly toxic nuclear waste is put into this storage facility, which the scientists who are responsible for it can be seen in a documentary laughing and joking about the fact that, you know, it has to hold this material for 100,000 years. We don't even know who built the pyramids, which were supposedly built only 3,500 years ago. I mean, if you believe the official story. And we have no idea who built them, what the technology was, etc., what the purpose was, etc. So imagine, you know, what the situation with a deep geological disposal facility for toxic nuclear waste is going to be in sort of 5,000 years, when the life by which it has to be buried is in excess of 100,000 years. Right. Well, the UK has no such facility. And so one of the options that's been tabled is to use a network of deep boreholes to bury this waste down. Now, if this sounds like rampant conspiracy, all people need to do is look at the work of Professor Fergus Gibb, that's Gibb, at Sheffield University, where for the past 2 decades, he's been working primarily with the US on developing the technology for the disposal of toxic nuclear waste in deep boreholes. And coincidentally, in April of 2015, the British government amended the Infrastructure Act to enable it to bury anything down deep wells that it wanted to without consultation with the local community. So, you know, more and more pieces of the jigsaw start to fall into place. And then more recently, of course, we have Greg Clark and James Brockenshire, 2 government ministers, putting forward the proposition that drilling deep boreholes should be regarded as permitted development and therefore should not require any consultation with local authorities or local communities. So you can see, you know, the potential prognosis for this is a lot more serious than even possibly that of the fracking agenda. So whether or not people do realise the longer term agenda for deep borehole disposal of toxic nuclear waste, or whether they're just looking at the issue of fracking and the academic, the scientific and the experiential evidence that is really now amounting on a daily basis, which all suggests that, you know, if common sense prevailed, this industry would be halted immediately. But the British government seems to want to push ahead of it. And over the last 6 years, you know, there's been well over 1,000 arrests now at the various campaigns around the country. It's Balcombe, Barton Moss, Crawberry Hill, West Newton, Upton in Cheshire, and Kirby Misperton, North Yorkshire, now at Misson Springs in Nottinghamshire, which is where I'm based, Tinker Lane a few miles away, and then across the southeastern quadrant of the Bowland Shale, well sites at Woodsets, Marsh Lane and Hart Hill, 2 of which are in southern Yorkshire and the other one's in northeast Derbyshire. So, you know, people are looking at the evidence and they're basically coming to the realization that, you know, if they sit back and just let this unfold, then, you know, they will be remiss in, you know, the responsibility that they have to future generations. And these, you know, 3 guys that were jailed last week, I mean, whether they have a history of activism or not, I don't know. I mean, I didn't know of them before they were arrested on the trucks. And there was 4 of them on the trucks, and they were left on the trucks by the police. You know, when truck surfing takes place as a means of protest, it's normally a few hours delay. But in this occasion, they were left on the trucks, and the total length of the protest was about 99 hours. They weren't, no one was up there for 99 hours, but from the time the first guy got on the truck to the time the last guy got off the truck, it was 99 hours. And at the time, I made the observation that I sensed that this was a deliberate ploy to create an opportunity to jail these guys when eventually they came to trial. Right. They did get a jury trial, and they were found guilty. And I don't think there's any issue with that. I'm not going to argue the case that, that they were guilty of, causing an obstruction. No more than that. There was no damage to trucks. They simply climbed on the trucks and sat on them for, the length of time that they did. Yeah. But when Judge Robert Altham came to pass sentence on Wednesday, having listened to the submissions from both the Crown Prosecution Service and the legal representatives of each of the individuals, he decided that it was appropriate to sentence two of them to 16 months imprisonment and one of 15 months. And the fourth guy, he gave a suspended sentence because he had actually pleaded guilty from the outset. So where does this leave us? Well, it means that basically if you decide that you are going to protest on something, there is now the risk that this will be used as precedent and you could get a jail sentence. But let me just make another observation here, because 2 years ago, almost to the day, Judge Robert Altham was presiding over a case of extremely graphic pornographic images, and it was actually September 2016. It was a guy by the name of Geoffrey Taylor, and he had 648 images of the most serious category A, 228 images that were category B, and some. Let me just quote from what the judge said. He said, "Somewhere in the world, there's a child who's been sexually abused or raped in order for people like you to gain some gratification from them. It is beyond any reasonable person to understand how anyone could gain any sort of gratification from watching a person perform a sexual offence on a child." He went on to say, "These were not girls in their early teens. They are children under 10. Certainly in one image, a child who can be no more than 2 or 3 years old." And he went on to say that must make the matter more serious. But in his final summing up, he simply said, for that reason, you ought to be thoroughly ashamed of yourself. And then he sentenced Geoffrey Taylor to 9 months jail, suspended for 12 months. And if we think that's an aberration, then, in June of 2017, he had another case, a guy called Keith Harley, who admitted 3 counts of possession of indecent images, 254 of which were deemed category A, 170 at category B, and 33,704 at category C. Most involved girls aged between 8 and 10. And Judge Altham said to him, Keith Harley, "I have absolutely no doubt that you were someone who from 2011 was actively seeking for images of children by which you would achieve some twisted sexual gratification." And what did he do? He sentenced Keith Harley to 12 months jail, suspended for 2 years. So, let's put this in perspective. We've got 3 guys here who were sentenced to jail sentences in excess of a year, not suspended, because they'd had the audacity to climb on trucks as a result of their conviction to prevent this toxic industry becoming established in this country. And yet 2 men who have extreme pornographic images, child pornography images on their computers, are given suspended sentence. So by sending this message, basically Judge Altham is stating to the wider community that child pornography is far more acceptable to the establishment than it is to challenge their corporatist agenda.
Right. It does pretty much let you know where you stand, doesn't it, when you put it into that context? And I know from hearing previous talks and interviews with you that you're someone that is open to the idea of spiritual and metaphysical components to what's going on in the world beyond just the sort of nuts and bolts detail of it all. And from what I can see, there are other reasons why the psychopaths behind this agenda want to destroy nature, and they want to affect the landscape and the geology in this way, because they just want to destroy everything that's, natural and inherent to creation. This brings in, I just want to read an excerpt from a letter here which was sent by Janice Barcelo, who's an American author and researcher. Are you familiar with her?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, she's written books on birth trauma and all kinds of stuff, and she's a great activist from America. Now, she had a smart meter put onto her building where she lives by her utility company against her will, and it made her ill. She's stated that she got all kinds of health defects from this smart meter that was put there against her consent. So she wrote a letter to the utility company, and I just want to read an excerpt of it here because I think it applies to this situation as well. Part of her letter to this company read, "Since our express consent is necessary for you to be absolved of accountability and liability, and since our consent is not forthcoming and being offered, you will be held both liable and accountable if you do not remove the digital meter promptly. Accountability for what you choose to do exists not only on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level, where your decision to take right action or not will follow you long after this life is complete. You are violating both spiritual and natural law, and there is a high price to pay for what you are doing or what you are not doing in terms of addressing this matter with integrity. The exchange of innocent lives for a paycheck will weigh heavy on your soul." Now, I love that, and I go along with all of that. And I think those components apply to the situation we've got here. And it might be worth a letter or two going out to some of the individuals that have taken these decisions in this case to remind them of the obligations that they have to creation and not just to profit and a paycheck. I hope that resonates with you. I think it probably would.
I think that those who have the belief system or embrace a belief system that enables them to do as they will, shall we say? They somehow believe that they have some protection against universal law, and they actually believe that they will reap the benefits from their actions in terms of not only destroying nature, but also advancing their perverse agenda, which of course benefits the few in the material realm, whilst penalising and subjugating the many. So, regardless of someone's, should I say, spiritual views, religious views, whatever, what this ultimately comes down to is, whilst we're in this mortal realm, whilst we're in this physicality, it's not possible for us to know everything that is beyond this, and that perhaps is part of the process. It's part of challenging us to find the right path, by limiting our access to the wider realms. But what does resonate with me from that letter is that smart meters, EMF, the constant bombardment of media is very much about shutting down the right brain. Very few people now embrace silence, and I mean I've often made the point that when I travel, and obviously I spend a lot of time on the road, and when I'm traveling, I travel in silence. I don't need music blaring at me all the time. I might listen to it occasionally, but I absolutely relish the opportunity to have that silence and open my mind to whatever inspiration, if you like, or whatever input is out there. Of course, ultimately, my left brain still has the opportunity to decide what it is going to embrace and what it isn't. It's part of the, if you like, the actualization, the integration. And, this is something that, it seems that those who are pushing this control agenda are absolutely scared shitless of. They cannot abide the prospect that an increasing number of people are embracing the full capacity of their consciousness. For the purpose of sort of my illustration here, I'll use the right brain, left brain. The left brain is that organ which enables us to interface with this limited physical realm. It taps into the visual and oral frequencies that we need to tap into to live in this particular reality. The right brain is not constrained by any of that. It's not constrained by frequency limitation. It's not constrained by the construct of time. But the left brain doesn't like to let go of control, and so a lot of what the right brain has to offer, the ego, if you like, will attempt to dismiss. And what the establishment are absolutely trying to do is to get people so locked into an egocentric way of life that anything that comes in from elsewhere is immediately dismissed unless it's perceived as being supporting of their agenda for self-gratification.
Right.
And of course, the more they're offered the self-gratification, the more they open themselves to, the control techniques of blackmail, etc. So, people very much have a choice. And nobody knows, you and I both know how seductive the material realm can be, Mark. Mm-hmm. We both know that, if your motivation is material rewards, or your motivation is sexual gratification, then, that kind of lifestyle can be very attractive. But if you look beyond that and you say, well, hang on a second, we're only in this physical realm for 80,000 days or whatever, give or take. How are we going to use that? Well, half of it is spent, just acclimatizing and sort of finding our way in this physical realm. And then, once we get into the sort of second half, we have an opportunity maybe to sort of contribute on a wider basis. But whether we're contributing or not, we also have an opportunity to learn. And I don't believe for 1 minute that the experience of that we gain whilst in this physical realm is lost when we leave this mortal coil. What actually happens to it, I have no idea. But I don't believe for 1 minute it's lost. And I believe that we, or whatever, will take that knowledge with us, and it will be used in the next stage of the journey, whatever that might be.
Well, I'd be inclined to agree with you, from what I've come to comprehend. And that letter that I just read out, that's a different kind of letter for somebody to receive. A fracking company boss or somebody from the police or judiciary, they're used to getting letters saying you shouldn't be damaging the environment, the ecosystem like this, you have no right to be doing this. But they won't be used to getting that kind of letter, which says there's going to be implications for your soul beyond this life based on the decisions that you're taking. I think that's...
They won't care.
Well,
I think it's
it depends how psychopathic they are.
I think that for most of them, they will just laugh at it. I think it's a good approach. It's definitely worth trying, and I think holding these people to account and advising them of their responsibility and the liability for not managing that responsibility appropriately is certainly not insignificant.
Well, and I think the odd individual receiving a letter like that might well mull it over in their minds for several days and come home and talk to their wife about it and really give it some thought, even if many others don't. But the ones that do laugh it off, they'll find out one day, I guess, when they leave this realm.
So let's take that forward then. I think that, the challenge as well is to encourage people to do what they feel they want to do and they can do. And one of the reasons that the anti-fracking campaign has been one of the most successful campaigns or successful social movements this country's seen, certainly since the days of poll tax, is that it is not a structured community, and it is very much a community of communities, all operating autonomously and independently. And I, for one, am not part of any one of those groups. I operate completely autonomously and independently, as do a number of others. And I simply, offer support wherever it is that, I feel it's appropriate or it's requested. But there are other people doing some wonderful stuff and taking some remarkable initiatives. And, what it needs is people to take initiative, to do stuff. I mean, if I had £1 for every time somebody had said to me, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Well, one of the things that we have actually succeeded within the anti-fracking community in doing is changing the vocabulary and getting away from, have you considered, have you thought of, why don't you, and all this, to you may be interested to know that I'm doing, or I have done, or I'm in the process of. And it's taking responsibility. Because, the establishment, part of the, if you like, the control mechanism is to keep people thinking that they're powerless, to keep people thinking they can't do anything. And people have this tendency to want to offer advice and guidance and suggest courses of action, but not actually do anything themselves. And that's what we have to change. We have to get people to actively participate. So, that letter's a great idea, but what it needs now is somebody to take that initiative, and maybe it's that lady, but I think you said she was probably overseas.
Yeah.
So it needs somebody in this country now to pick that up as an initiative. I got an absolutely outstanding report from somebody the other day who actually I knew about a decade ago through something completely different. They're not part of the anti-fracking community per se, but this is what makes the report so exceptional, because they've come at it with a completely fresh set of eyes. And, it started as a report. And I think the individual concerned didn't really realize sort of perhaps the power of this report. But now that he's seeing that, it really does have some legs, and people are appreciative of what the content of that report, that individual is now looking to actually take his participation to a whole new level. And this is the crucial element. This is absolutely crucial. The establishment doesn't want people to participate. It wants people to just be, good wage slaves. Get up in the morning, go through the usual morning routine, get on the train or drive to work, do what they need to do at work, and then go home and, watch TV or whatever until they go to bed. It doesn't want people to be capable of independent thought. It certainly doesn't want people to have the time to think things through in any substance. And by the way, of course, that's one of the primary objectives behind the smoking ban. It's to stop people coming together. That's why we've seen the phenomenal demise of pubs over the last decade. As people don't go out, they don't get together. So those community hubs are disappearing. So, we have to find new ways. We have to evolve. We have to get creative. And this is the crucial element now. It's social media obviously has a role to play. I mean, like all things, it has its advantages and, it has its disadvantages. But if there was one message that I would really ask that people give consideration to, it's what can I do? Not what can I talk about, not what can I suggest, it's what can I do. Right. And, if something doesn't work, then obviously you maybe try another tack. And just because something doesn't work the first time doesn't mean to say that if you try it with a slightly different angle the next time, you don't find a breakthrough. I mean, when I'm in court on Tuesday challenging the IGAS injunction, this will be the third injunction, and it's effectively an injunction against peaceful protest. I've lost the previous two, although I had some minor successes in changing the terms within those injunctions. But each time I go through that process, I'm getting more experience in the courtroom environment. I'm going into the lion's den. They don't like litigant in person. They much prefer to be dealing with people who are bound by the rules of the Bar Association. But, that's just one angle. So, we just keep chipping away until we undermine this. And then the edifice one day is just going to crumble.
Right. I can certainly relate to people saying you should do this, someone should do that. Because I get that in my work. People say to me all the time, oh, you should look into this subject and somebody should dig into this. And the response is always, well, how about you? Why don't you do it? Yeah. And then show the rest of us what you've found. So, I relate to all of that.
I mean, one of the mantras that we have in the anti-fracking community is if you think of a job, you got it.
Yeah, right.
It's your job, yeah.
That's right. Now, a lot of people may be deterred from getting involved in any kind of activism now, having seen what happened to these guys being made an example of this week. What tips would you have for people that want to get involved but want to stay out of trouble, that can't afford to go to jail because they've got families or whatever? I've seen you get carted off by security before from some fracking site. So do you have any tips for people in terms of how they can get effectively involved but avoid these kind of pitfalls?
Well, I mean, let's go back 5 years. I had absolutely no experience of anything like this. I had certainly never been in a situation where I was up close and personal with the police, and I certainly had very limited experience of the courtroom. So 5 years, and my education has been enhanced very, very significantly. Look, with all things, you don't go in at the deep end. When I first participated in the Balkan protest, which was the summer of 2013, I was there primarily as an observer. I was there primarily to document, to film, to monitor. I had no intention of getting arrested. I had no intention of literally being sort of, the front line. Obviously now I've got a bit more experience, and it's still not my preference to get arrested, and I do try and avoid that. I don't think that's necessarily the best use of my time or my resources, but if it came to that, then so be it. I deal with that at the time. But people, what the establishment wants to say is, look, what we're doing here isn't stopping people protesting. But, the establishment definition of protest is standing on the side of the street and waving a placard. And whilst the industry, whatever an industry that might be, just carries on doing what it's doing, and those who are drawing their salary checks just laugh and give the finger at those who are standing on the side of the road waving their placards. Ingrained within the European Convention on Human Rights, and which found its way onto the British statute books as the Human Rights Act of 1998, part of that is the Article 10, the freedom of expression, Article the 11, the right to assembly. Now, the British courts have said that these are qualified rights. And the way that is being interpreted right now in the courts is that basically the commercial agenda has absolute precedence over any concerns for human health and well-being. So obviously what the establishment wants to do is to scare people away from opposing its absurd agenda, where, commerce is king. It doesn't want people to oppose it. And so it wants people to put people into fear. But, so you start by going along and just lending support by, observing what's occurring and making sure that you don't step off the pavement, if you like, because then you've got no risk. There will always be people who, will push the boundaries, and there'll be those who are galvanized. And I mean, I think that's what's occurred last week, is that the incarceration of these three anti-fracking protesters has turned the whole campaign from anti-fracking to one of civil rights, because it doesn't matter now what it is that you're protesting against. The legal precedent has been set now, And so, when the unconventional gas industry isn't the issue, and it's the burial of toxic nuclear waste in a borehole that was drilled at the end of your road, and you discover this toxic nuclear waste is being buried down that borehole, and the only reason you discover it is because a whole bunch of kids under the age of 12 have developed leukemia within a sort of 1 mile radius. I mean, just take a look at the island of Alderney. There's no children on Alderney today in the Channel Islands because of the nuclear waste that was dumped just to the north of the island in the Herd Deep over a period of about 30 odd years up until 1983. And here we are, 40 odd years, not even 35 years later, and there's no children on that island. And, what are we going to find? That, right now it's fracking, allegedly. So the government wants these deep boreholes. And then surreptitiously, they start dumping the toxic nuclear waste down there. And then what are we going to find? That over a period of time, there's great areas of the UK where it's impossible to raise children because of the risk of leukemia due to the radiation in the area. So, and anybody who has the audacity to protest against this finds themselves potentially thrown in jail. So that's why it's so crucial to simply encourage people to look at what is occurring here. Look at what the establishment are doing today and look at how that will impact on future generations. And, if you're not comfortable with that, if you're not comfortable leaving a legacy where, great tranches of this country are uninhabitable, or maybe worse, because, maybe we have a situation where water becomes so highly priced because of its scarcity, fresh water that isn't contaminated by frack waste or frack chemicals or nuclear waste. Unfortunately, what I potentially foresee, unless people start to participate, is, a dystopian nightmare that would be considered to be something out of sci-fi. And, just to swing it back to what you were alluding to earlier, once you actually commit to participating in this, it's amazing how much help you get from whatever quarter.
Right. There's a lot of talk about heroes and role models in popular culture. This is what I get into in my work, and I warn people against having these because we don't really know who these celebrities and all these public figures are. But in all honesty, if we're going to have any heroes, I would suggest it would be guys and girls like these activists who place their personal freedom and safety on the line to try and prevent injustices against people and against creation. These are the true heroes, never mind bloody Hollywood actors and rock stars and sporting legends.
Absolutely. But, let's also get it in perspective, because actually the anti-fracking community consists of thousands of heroes. And anybody who's waiting for someone to come along on a white Charger, with a big S on their chest and a cape maybe over their shoulders, is going to be very, very disappointed and waiting a long time. I mean, every single person within the anti-fracking community, whatever it is that they are doing, is a hero, and they are making a difference. And it may be, that they're putting flyers through doors. It may be that they're knocking on doors, talking to people, particularly in those areas that are under direct threat. It may be that they're writing freedom of information requests to government departments, finding out, about communications with some of these companies, and in fact, finding out areas where they are claiming to be enforcing gold standard regulations when, they're not. And in fact, they have no clue what's actually occurring. This is a campaign that has so many tentacles. It has no leader. And this is the beauty of it, because the establishment don't know how to deal with it. They know how to deal with an NGO. They know how to deal with an organization as a structure. What they don't know how to deal with is a community-driven opposition that is literally highly interconnected obviously, much of that through social media. But every single small group and even individuals within those groups are operating with absolute autonomy and independence. And, I don't know where the next challenge is coming from the anti-fracking community, and neither does the industry. And, there are so many challenges going on right now. I mean, there's multiple court cases, there's injunctions, and there's challenges to those injunctions. There's judicial reviews being sought. And, that's why after nearly 6 years, we still haven't had a frack in this country since the moratorium was lifted. And although, there is a risk that Preston New Road, just outside Blackpool, is on the cusp of being fracked. And by the way, it ain't over until it's over. And there are still moves underway to try and prevent that frack from happening. But even if it does, it will still be the only frack to occur in this country this side of 2020, because there's nowhere else in the country that's even close to being in that position. A year ago, we thought Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire was going to be fracked, but we managed, the collective the anti-fracking community and the community in North Yorkshire, who went under the banner of Frack-Free Rydale, did a truly outstanding job of running Third Energy out of North Yorkshire. So that ain't going to happen anytime soon. So that's, we just got to keep that pressure on and stop looking for heroes. Go read Joseph Campbell, and see what he had to say about heroes, because every single person listening to this has the opportunity to be a hero, and that means just getting involved and doing what you know to be right.
That's right. Be your own hero. And there seems to be quite a high awareness of fracking among the general public. I do a driving job, private hire driving, and I have all these punters in the back of my car. I had this American woman a while back, and she just started talking about fracking out of nowhere, about how she was concerned about it, and she was doing what she could to try and keep it at bay. And I was very impressed, and I said, yeah, that's great. I said, and also chemtrails is a big problem as well. She was like, chem what now? So there's awareness of fracking, but people still don't know about these other things. So now your daily reports from the field, do they continue on Facebook?
They do, yeah. And, part of, first of all, I live in a field, so, it's quite easy for me to step outside and do the broadcast from outside my caravan. But, there's another purpose of being outside. And that is, part of the subliminal, if you like, there is that you actually got to get out. You got to get out. You got to get off your computer. You got to get off your sofa. And you've actually got to get out and physically contribute. Now, that's not to say there isn't stuff that can be done on the computer, of course. But ultimately, that work then needs to be taken into the wider arena. So, what I do is at 8:30 a.m. most weekday mornings. I will be doing one tomorrow, but not Tuesday, because I shall be in the London courts. If anybody wants to join me there, I'm at Fetter Lane, and this is Ireland Gas versus Persons Unknown and Ian Rowland Crane. And we'll be seeking an adjournment for a substantial hearing, hopefully either later this month or sometime in November. But anyway, I'm out there 8:30, and people can watch them either on my one of my Facebook pages, because Facebook seemed to block me with increasing regularity, or on my YouTube channel, which is the Ian R. Crane YouTube channel.
Okay. And do we have an AV10 coming May next year?
We do AV10. In fact, well over half the tickets are sold already. Such is the regard for AV10, and you've participated in AV events, Mark, and for me, the conference itself is the catalyst to bring people together. The most important part of AV is the fact that we bring so many people together under one roof for a weekend. They don't have to worry about accommodation. They don't have to worry about food. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue. The quality of the food is outstanding. And obviously, I make an effort to put together a list of speakers who are right at the forefront of whatever it is they're doing. And my focus is always very much on people who are making a direct contribution into bringing about the changes that we all know we need to see. And every one of my speakers at the AV events are available for informal discussion throughout the weekend. And this is what makes AV so unique, because, most conferences, the speaker rocks up on stage, delivers their monologue, and then that's it, they're gone. And, there might be a few minutes for some questions at the end of their talk, but basically, they see the organizer, get their expenses, and then they're away. AV, everybody's under this one roof for 3 full days. And so, if anybody has any questions or concerns about anything, or wants to share something from their own experience with one of the speakers, they have the opportunity to do so. And next year's event, AV10, will run from Friday the 10th of May until Monday the 13th of May, 2019, of course.
Okay. And that's alternativeview.co.uk for all the info, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, I saw somebody laying into the organiser of another conference online in the week, and he was having a go at this organiser for having the audacity to charge ticket prices, admission prices to the conference. And this guy was saying, in this age of technology where we have Skype calls and video links and all the rest of it, why do you even need to have people turn up when you could just have them on computer links and stuff? And like you just said, that just defeats the whole object of one of these events. It's the social element. It's the energy that you get when people come and pull their consciousness together in one place that is the real value. Who wants to go and watch a bloody YouTube video or somebody on a screen from 500 miles away versus being in a room with a bunch of other people that share your interests? He'd missed the entire point of the event there.
I concur with that. I mean, listen, I had a speaker, this is a couple of years ago now, who about 3 months before the event, as people know, I don't normally announce my speakers list until about 2 months before the event. But I had a speaker who I got lined up, and he said, "Oh, Ian, I can't make it, but I can do a Skype link." And I said, "Well, if you can't make it, you can't make it." He said, No, but I can still contribute through Skype." And I said, "No, you're missing the point of Alternative View. And the point of the Alternative View is that you're there for 3 days, and that people can talk with you. People can actually have a conversation with you rather than just listen to you pontificate." Yeah. And, he got it. Hasn't been to an AV yet, and maybe he'll come to one. But, yes, absolutely. And of course, this is what the establishment wants. The establishment doesn't want people coming together. It's doing everything it can to separate people, right, to keep people, just keeping their eyes on their screen as opposed to having face-to-face interaction. Yeah. So, And by the way, I mean, no one who's ever been to an AV event has ever challenged the cost of the event. I mean, obviously, there's the cost of the event, plus there's the cost of the accommodation. I know it's not cheap. I know it's not within everybody's budget. But we've always worked on the principle that if somebody really wants to come, between us, we'll find a way to get them there. So my counsel to anyone who has any concerns about the costing is simply, hey, listen, there's opportunity. You go and organize your own event. And you charge what you think's appropriate, and let me know how you get on. Right. I mean, I think that the vast majority of people, I mean, considering the number of people that come back time and time again to AV events, I mean, I think the general conception is that for what's on offer, it's extremely good value.
Right. And I don't know about you, but I welcome any opportunity to get away from my frigging screen. I spend too much time on it already. So, a weekend in good company away from bloody computer screens works for me. Anyway, we'll leave it there, Ian. Thanks for coming on today. Appreciate your time and keep up the good work, mate.
Thanks, Mark. Catch up with you soon.
This is just a wrap.
I'm picking up vibrations.